For the last few weeks, I've been wearing two watches simultaneously on my wrists. One of them cost £400 off Vinted back in November 2024, a Garmin Epix Pro Gen 2 Sapphire, a watch that originally retailed at £829 and is the best sports watch I've ever had. The other cost me £40, also off Vinted, in April 2026, an Amazfit Bip 6, a smartwatch that launched with a retail recommended price of just £80. And the question I want to ask is, does spending 10 times more actually get you 10 times the watch? Before we get into it, this video isn't sponsored. Both watches were bought with my own money, so everything you hear is purely based on my own experience. So let's start with the specs. The Garmin Epix Pro Gen 2 Sapphire is a 47mm multisport powerhouse. You get a stunning always-on, which you can turn off, AMOLED display behind a scratch-resistant sapphire lens set in a titanium bezel. It supports multiband GPS across multiple satellite systems for pinpoint accuracy. It has preloaded topographical maps, built-in LED flashlight. Battery life sits at up to 16 days in smartwatch mode or up to 41 days in battery saver mode. The Amazfit Bip 6, on the other hand, is a 46mm everyday smartwatch. It packs a bright AMOLED display with always-on capability. You get built-in 5-system GPS with free downloadable offline maps. Battery life is rated at up to 14 days in standard mode. On paper, the Amazfit Bip 6 looks like an absolute steal, but specs on a page only tell you so much. Before we get into the testing, it's worth talking about how these watches actually feel to live with day to day. Both are genuinely comfortable to wear, and neither feels obtrusive on the wrist, even wearing them simultaneously for weeks on end. Where they differ significantly is the build quality. The Garmin Epix Pro, with its titanium bezel and sapphire glass, is a watch I genuinely never worry about knocking around. I'm now well into my second year owning it. It hasn't got a scratch on it. It feels pretty indestructible in the best possible way. The Bip 6 feels incredible for the money, but you're not getting the same level of materials, and it doesn't feel quite as resistant to everyday knocks. I've kept a soft case on it since I got it for that reason, and I do regret not putting a screen protector on it from day one. Within the first week, I managed to pick up a few pretty significant scratches on the screen. Now onto battery life. I wanted to test battery life properly rather than just taking the manufacturer's word for it, so I ran both watches simultaneously from the same starting charge. Starting with always on display turned off, the Bip 6 lasted just over 11.5 days with 3 sports activities totaling around 90 minutes. The Epix Pro lasted just over 11.75 days, squeezing in a 4th activity and around 120 minutes of total tracked activity time. Then I switched both to always on display. The Bip 6 lasted just over 4 days, including one 21-minute activity. The Epix Pro lasted just under 5.5 days, including 3 activities, totaling 2 hours. On charging, both took around 2 hours from empty to full. Right, let's talk about how these watches actually perform when you're out there doing the thing that they're supposed to help you with, and that is workout performance. Before we even get into the detail, there's something worth flagging about the Bip 6 that is very rare at the sub £100 price point. The Bip 6 has built-in maps, and just like the Epix Pro, you can upload routes to the watch for navigation. That's a feature I'd normally associate with mid-tier watches costing upwards of £250, so seeing it on a sub £100 device is genuinely wild. If you've seen my previous videos about setting up a Garmin for running, optimizing data screens, setting up goals, alerts, auto laps, virtual paces, you'll know that that's a pretty involved process, but one that I massively value. I didn't really expect to find much of that on this £40 watch, but how wrong I was. With the run mode, you can customize data screens with up to 6 data points, with a huge range of choices available. Not quite the 8 data screens that you can get on the Epix Pro, but it is pretty remarkable at this price, and you can set up goals, alerts, auto laps, and virtual paces, I was genuinely very surprised. Both watches also have the ability to have structured workouts pushed directly to the device, and this is a feature I've come to take completely for granted on the Epix Pro. When I'm following a marathon training plan, workouts from third-party apps like Runner and Cooper are pushed straight to Garmin Connect and onto my watch seamlessly. The Bip 6 can also have workouts pushed to it, but the third-party app integration that makes that so effortless on the Garmin simply isn't there yet. What it does have is a connection with intervals.icu, and the Zepp app itself has a solid library of pre-built running and high rocks workouts that can be pushed straight to the watch. Not quite the Garmin ecosystem, but far more than I expected. On mapping and routing, once a route is loaded onto the Bip 6, it's very good to follow. Clear, audible turn alerts, and easy to read maps. Getting the route onto the watch in the first place is where it falls short a little bit with the Bip 6. With the Epix Pro, a Strava planned route auto syncs in seconds. With the Bip 6, you have to go into the app manually, and plotting something from scratch isn't particularly straightforward. It's not a deal breaker, but it is a noticeable gap. So the feature set is pretty remarkable, but features only matter if they actually work, so let's get into the performance. Starting with GPS accuracy, and in one word, it's pretty solid. There were very minor differences between the two watches across all my runs, and all within a completely acceptable range. Moving on to heart rate. For all my running tests alongside both watches, I wore a Polar Verity Sense bicep-based heart rate monitor as a reference device. It came out top in my heart rate monitor testing in a previous video, which I'll link in the description. Both watches ran their own onboard sensors independently, with the Polar purely as the benchmark. I uploaded all workouts to Strava and compared the relative effort scores against the reference device. Things did start pretty well. My first two runs saw the Bip 6 tracking closely with both the Garmin and the reference device, but then it unraveled a little bit. Across 6 activities, the Bip 6 was only in an acceptable range about half the time. On 3 of those activities, it struggled significantly, either reading 25 to 30 beats per minute too low for an entire workout, or taking around 15 minutes to gradually climb up to where the other 2 were sitting. By the time it caught up, the damage to the overall relative effort score was already done. The Garmin actually surprised me here. I've historically found wrist-based heart rate, including on the Garmin, pretty unreliable, even on premium devices. So for the Epix Pro to have tracked as closely as it did against the Polar Verity Sense was actually genuinely unexpected. That said, outside of this testing, I always pair the Garmin with the Polar anyway, and the good news is that you can do the same with the Bip 6. It pairs well with an external sensor, like the Polar Verity Sense, or the Amazfit Helio strap, and when you do that, the results are pretty solid. If heart rate matters to you, the Bip 6 isn't a dead end, you just need to give it a helping hand with an external heart rate monitor. Next, I want to talk about the app experience. I've spoken before about the Amazfit Zepp app in my screen-free wearables video last year, and my view hasn't changed. I genuinely really like it. It takes a tab-based approach around 4 areas: an overview, hybrid charge, which was formerly known as biocharge, sleep, and exertion. It's pretty clear where Amazfit got their inspiration from. Whoop, anyone? That isn't actually a criticism. The result is an app experience that's genuinely enjoyable to use day to day. Each tab gives you enough information without tipping into data overload, and the deeper stats are there when you want them. There are plenty of explainers telling you what your metrics mean, with clear guidance on what to focus on, which not every app bothers with. Everything related to the Bip 6 lives within that one app, the App Store, watch faces, all of it. Which sounds like a small thing until you compare it to Garmin, where you need a completely separate app called Connect IQ just to download things like watch faces. It's a jarring extra step that breaks what should be a seamless experience. Garmin Connect, on the other hand, is fine. It always has been. Much better than Polar's Flow app, certainly, but sitting next to Zepp or Whoop or Apple Fitness, Garmin Connect is starting to feel aesthetically dated. It is functional rather than considered, and nothing quite has the visual appeal of some of those best apps that I've just mentioned. Personally, I've used Garmin Connect for so long that muscle memory just gets me around it on autopilot, but I think coming to it fresh as a new user, I think the Zepp app would be a much friendlier place to land. Next, let's look at some directly comparable daily metrics across 11 straight days of wearing both watches simultaneously. Let's talk about steps first. The Garmin averaged around 1,800 more steps per day than the Bip 6, and I know exactly why that is. Amazfit openly acknowledges that its step counting algorithm only registers steps once you've taken more than 10 consecutive ones. Stop-start movements throughout the day simply don't get counted. To test continual steps, I did a 1,000 step test with a manual tally counter with both watches in walking activity mode. The Bip 6 came in at 1,009 steps and the Garmin at 1,022. So for continuous walking activities, it's actually very accurate. It's everyday stop-start movements where it falls behind. Calories were pretty consistent across all 11 days, with the Garmin Epix Pro averaging just under 100 more per day than the Bip 6, but I'd say both were within a perfectly acceptable range of each other. Sleep duration was well aligned on 7 of the 11 nights, typically within 15 minutes of each other. On 3 nights though, there were dramatic differences of over an hour, and at worst 2 hours and 11 minutes. The most striking example was Bank Holiday Monday on the 4th of May. Both watches had me asleep at around 11:55 p.m. The Garmin had me up at 6:50 a.m, which felt wrong for a bank holiday. The Bip 6 had me waking up at 8 a.m, which felt far more realistic. The Garmin also recorded 1 hour and 47 minutes of awake time during the night, with the Bip 6 recording just 48 minutes. But it's good to see the majority of nights were well aligned. Finally, HRV. Yes, I know my numbers are low, so don't come at me in the comments, but the alignment between the two watches was excellent. The maximum difference on any single night was never more than 2 points. For a metric that can be notoriously variable between devices, that's impressive. So where does all of this leave us? The Amazfit Bip 6 has genuinely surprised me. The GPS accuracy is solid. The running features, customizable data screens, maps, goals, alerts, auto laps, virtual paces are pretty remarkable for the money. The app experience is enjoyable. The daily metric tracking is largely solid. The battery life is very impressive. If you'd shown me the feature list without a price tag, I'd have guessed at least 3 or 4 times the cost. But there is one issue that for me as a runner is pretty hard to overlook, and it isn't the heart rate thing during activities. I wear polarized sunglasses on pretty much every daylight run, and when I do, the Bip 6 screen goes completely black. I'll show you the footage so you can see exactly what I mean, and it's not subtle. The Garmin Epix Pro, under the same conditions, is completely fine. But if you run mostly in low light or overcast conditions, or you don't wear polarized sunglasses, the Bip 6 is a genuinely outstanding budget sports watch. The Garmin Epix Pro remains the watch I'll be reaching for on my runs and on my wrist full stop. But for someone who does want that richer smartwatch experience alongside a genuinely capable sports watch, I can see the Bip 6 becoming a permanent fixture on their wrist. At £80 new, or you can pick it up fairly regularly for around £40 second hand, the value is almost impossible to argue with. Right, so that is it. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments below. And if you found this video useful, please do give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time. See ya.